Hello, everybody. Welcome to Good Tech, an ongoing discussion about ethics and technology. I'm Elizabeth Perry with IDCA, and today we're going to be talking about the big trouble in big data. Is the answer to taking back our privacy right under our noses? Is it here now? Today we'll talk about some of the issues with data, big data, and big tech, and about some suggested solutions to the problem of privacy. And here's a question we're going to try to answer today. Should your data be treated like cash, the same way your bank treats cash? We'll take a look at that too. But first, I'd like to introduce our guest for today, CEO of First Retail, data strategist, digital transformation expert, and frequent speaker on the topic of data and privacy, Gam Dias. Sorry, welcome, Gam. So Gam, you describe yourself as a privacy advocate and a data miner. Maybe interesting to talk about this for a minute. Can you explain, how do you do both? What's been your relationship to big tech, big data? How can you be both?
Yeah, let's put privacy on hold for a second and talk about just my background. I come from enterprise technology, the Oracle ecosystem, big enterprises who sit on an awful lot of data. And most of my career has been with business intelligence, e-commerce, data analytics, and data strategy. And so we work with very, very large companies, the Fortune 100, helping them understand what data that they're sitting on, and understand how to commercialize it. Now, commercialize might mean selling it. At its worst case, it might mean just extracting benefit out of it. And, we do it for insurance companies, retailers, banks, industrials. Now, and that is a very, very lucrative business, particularly for them. And they're realizing it. And it's quite a thing. I think there's a term, big data, that we use, which kind of means how much money can we make with data? Now, on the flip side, like many, many people, I have always been awake to, my data is being used. And I think there's an increasing number of people having that realization right now. So I think we can talk about the whole privacy thing, but I have been very conscious and aware for the last 20 years that our data is being used, on our behalf, and in some cases where we're not expecting it.
Right. So let's take a look at this this graphic here, where we see the big seven. Tony, you want to put that graphic up? That would be great. The big seven. What are they doing? No, not that one. The GAFA one. GAFA BAT. The first graphic. Not on the slides. Sorry. That one. There you go. All right. So here we are with the big seven, right? We've got GAFA plus BAT. We've got Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon. And then in Asia, we've got Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent. What are your thoughts when you look at this graphic?
Great. It's everything that we tell our clients to do. I guess Google is the master of this, and we have this thing called data alchemy that we tell organizations. It's look at the data, look at the byproducts of that data that you might never have expected. Flip the data on its head or pivot it, and then you can create something out of it that you can sell. So let me just explain Google's philosophy. They index the web, and they did it for free, and they allowed you to search for things that you wanted, and they index millions of web pages and billions. And you can get to a web page that you need. And it's a very useful activity. Imagine life today without Google. However, when you pivot that data slightly, what you get is the searches that each person has made in sequence. So you understand what they want. And then you can take that sequence of searches and predict what the customer is going to want next. And you can sell advertising. So that is data alchemy. And we teach our clients how to take their data, how to take the exhaust of their data and monetize it and commercialize it. And so Tony, if you flip that infographic slide, when the big data movement came on, what we did was we started off by telling our clients, how to acquire data, how to generate more sources of new data, how to manufacture data, and then to hold it in some sort of data lake. And then if you zoom in, you'll see that out of it, you can create data products. And this is where we help them understand customer-facing value propositions or things that they can go back to their suppliers with or partners with to create new uses of that data. So in terms of my commercial head, that chart is exactly what we should be doing. And when organizations start to use data, it increases the value of everything. So I really do truly believe in the whole big data philosophy that data can be used for benefit. If you shove your money under the bed, it doesn't work for you. If you put it in the bank goes and reinvests it and does things for it. So it's the same principles with data. So in short, that infographic is almost the success of the big data movement.
Mm-hmm. So, but there are problems with big tech, right? And don't tell me you don't know this, because let's talk about Facebook for a second, right? It seems that it's gotten the brunt of tech lash over the past year or so, maybe even more. Let's talk about Facebook for a second. You used to mess with Facebook, right? You used to mess with their algorithms. How did you do that, and what's the story?
Well, it started when I joined Facebook, and I realized that, there was a lot of my stuff that was turning, but being a data person, as I post, as people post, you kind of see the data that goes on behind it. And we have this thing called the data mindset, is where you look at something, you see what the data lives behind it. And we saw this, and I began by changing my location. And in the early days, you could change your location and all the ads would change and they'd be localized. And so I would change my app location to Indonesia, and all the ads for about a week would change to being written in another language and be relevant to Indonesians. And I think Facebook got smart to that. They recognized, they can figure out your location and correct for it. And then there was this thing, when you wish, you get wished happy birthday on your birthday, don't you, on Facebook? And sometimes it felt really insincere. It felt like the press of a button, oh yeah. And all these people whom I don't really know wishing me happy birthday. And admittedly, I used it as the reminder. Facebook is now the holder of our birthday information more than anything else. Anyway, I decided it was a little bit insincere. So, January 1st, 2011, I decided to change my birthday to January 1st. And everybody wished me happy birthday. And I liked it so much. On January 2nd, I thought, let's make January 2nd my birthday. And everybody wished me happy birthday. And it went on, and I thought I'd do it for the whole month. And people were wishing me happy birthday twice or 3 times. People who knew better, people who knew me in the real world, were wishing me happy birthday. A few people were getting smart. Now, what happened the next year was I decided to do it again. So January 1st, January 2nd, January 3rd came along, and it was midnight, and I was changing my birthday up to January 4th, and I get a message from Facebook. So Tony, if you want to throw that Facebook slide up, I get a message from Facebook, and it said, this is the last time you change your birthday. And so I thought, well, that's a little bit weird. Why should Facebook be the arbiter of when my birthday is? That's my day, not theirs. They're not the passport office. And it turns out, if you think about it, that information is very, very valuable to Facebook. because if it has my gender right, if it has my age right, and my birthday right, and my location right, it can advertise better. And Facebook's entire revenue model is built on advertising. And so to get them to click on things is a huge thing. So, Facebook, that there is a backlash. To me at this point, it was kind of annoying, and one of the things is Facebook does know an awful lot about me. Problem is, why are the ads so bad if it knows that much about me and what I'm going to do? So that's my kind of, there's this continuing messing, because Facebook is, they've got a lot of great engineers and artificial intelligence experts. And so they are working on all of this. So it's kind of interesting to push Facebook's boundaries to see exactly what happens. Incidentally, I now celebrate my birthday on January 4th because nobody wishes me happy birthday anymore on my real birthday, because I've left it where Facebook told me to leave it.
Oh, I love that story. But listen, so that's funny and all, and you had a fun time with that. But a lot of people, are not liking what Facebook is doing with people's data. And, you're coming with some solutions on how to use people's data, right? With the big companies that you're working with. And on the question of that I kind of asked earlier before you came on is using your data like cash. And that's something you've been advocating. Can you explain a little bit what you mean by that?
Yeah, actually, you've given me another thought. I'm going to diverge from the agenda from the script a little bit here. I think for about the last 10, 15 years, I've been watching people try to sell their data online. The first was a guy who, actually a friend of mine, Chris Downs, he sold his data on eBay back in 2003. This was under the Data Protection Act in the UK. It was very hard to get your data. He was given the runaround by a lot of organizations at the time. Eventually he came up with 800 pages, which he sold. And just to prove that you could do it and that data was valuable. So ever since then, there's been, some organizations who turn up and they say, well, isn't it bad that Google's making so much money off our data? It's our data. We should make that money. And so what they do is they create a way that we can give our data to this organization, and they will broker it for us. They will aggregate it and broker it and sell it and give us back some money. Now, I haven't made a lot of money on that, to be honest. But there are a set of organizations that are busy doing this. Now, the problem is that my data as an atom is worth nothing. In aggregate, it's actually worth a lot. So I believe that, organizations like Google and Facebook that are aggregating data, doing things to it and adding value, it's just like any other manufacturing process, and they're creating value out of it. And so that's not that is turning data into cash. But going back to your question, should we treat data like money? Now, data is on the move. We know this. Our data is currently being held by, hundreds of organizations. It's in databases all over the place. And one of the things I always think about is if I were to die physically, my Facebook page would remain intact and possibly turned into a tribute page. I hope so. My LinkedIn page would remain intact, and my bank account details the transactions would still be on a record somewhere. So if I was to physically die, there will be a lot of data about me still in existence. Now, let's turn it the other way around and say if I was to be alive and all my data was to get deleted, wow, I couldn't get a job, couldn't open a bank account, couldn't get a credit card, couldn't travel. So life becomes very, very difficult. So our data is kind of spread everywhere now, and it's also on the move. It's being exchanged on a regular basis. If you think about, every time you do something with your bank or a loan or one of those accounts, the data transfers between a couple of companies. Our bank data, our transactions get sent to Experian and used to develop our credit score. And when I go out to get a new loan or get a new phone, I get a credit rating. So our data is on the move. Now, going back to this kind of economy of money and economy of data, money moves, and that's what creates a prospering economy. And data, I believe, should move too. And the more movement, the more value we create, and the more everybody can potentially benefit. Now, the banks or the financial system has worked out over the years that to allow money to move freely, you need to put three things in place: transparency, governance, and control. So transparency, that anytime my money moves, I know that that movement has happened. There are some very strict laws in the financial services industry about how that money moves and how those movements are auditable and tracked. And finally, I have mechanisms where I can control the movement of money. My online bank account, I have proxies, things that happen to allow me to do things with money. Now, I believe that if we had the same set of controls over data, that data would start to flow freely between organizations. So hence, this behavior of data analogous to the behavior of money, can we put transparency in place? How can I know whenever my data moves between two companies? Is there enough governance? And we'll probably get on to GDPR later, but the governance is starting to come. And then the interesting part comes with control. How do I start to control the movements? Right now, I know the data is moving. There's an inkling of governance, but even if I did, I have no control over what's happening to it right now.
Mm-hmm. So, let's just go back to your data privacy advocate role here. And you've got a big data background. You analyze everything. Outcome gives you insight into human behavior. How do you preserve any privacy when you're trying to analyze all this data? You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like you're wearing two hats.
Oh, yes. Right now, in professional terms, we encourage our clients to comply as much as possible. So to de-identify or to anonymize data, all the standard things to do that. And, obviously all the information security that you need to put in place. There's a lot of things that your chief privacy officer will comply on, and we encourage them to do this. Now, a lot of our clients don't have personally identifiable information, but one of the things that I'm trying to get organizations to do is to build more transparency into how they're using that data. And so I'm a big advocate of big print rather than small print. We tend to be coerced into signing a lot of things because it's in small print, and we really can't be bothered reading the 20-page terms of service agreement. And so one of the things I'm trying to get our clients to do is use big print and be very, very explicit about how they are using data. So that transparency thing is I think that's the first step that we've got to overcome.
So you're coming at it from a corporate perspective, and in the sense that they're the ones who have to fix the problem. Is that what you're saying?
All the time. I don't think the individuals care really. They say they care. If you ask somebody, do you care about your privacy? What are they going to say? No. Do you care about your personal data being used? Of course they're going to say yes. If you actually look at the studies and surveys that are out there, what is it? Let's say Pew Research. Apparently 91% of Americans agree or strongly agree that we've lost our control over how our data is collected. In the UK, the Direct Marketing Association said that You know, people are getting less concerned about the use of online privacy, and they're happy to have their data shared. That survey was by the Direct Marketing Association and Axiom, strangely enough. There was a consumer digital behavior study by A.T. Kearney that said people have, few customers have a higher level of confidence in US privacy laws, but they do view banks as their best agents in managing their privacy. Now, that was interesting because A.T. Kearney's customers are banks. So, you know, it really depends on who commissions the survey, the answer you're going to get. But, you know, so there is this notion that we care about privacy. And there's a very big privacy movement about. The Internet Identity Workshop have a list of privacy companies that is growing and growing and growing. Yet, our behaviors suggest that we don't really care about privacy. Facebook perhaps may be in decline, but, you know, another Facebook company, Instagram, is just growing. You know, Pinterest is about to IPO. These companies have nothing but our data. You know, and so our professional lives are posted on LinkedIn. You know, we don't, that notion of privacy, I think, has maybe it's a little false notion. Maybe there was no privacy, or maybe there was a time, let's just say, when we started to move to cities until the internet turned up, that we had some sort of notion that we weren't being watched. However, you know, you walk around on the streets of the UK, you run any transaction, or you carry a mobile phone, you don't have much privacy left right now. So I believe that consumers might say they want it, but in return for the free services we get, there's, you know, they're not, you know, they're not prepared to act. You know, I think if Google charged per search, what would happen?
Right. Well, okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between privacy, data privacy, and, well, let me ask you this: what will people care about when it comes to data?
If I sum it up and say control, really.
Yeah.
I've been having a lot of conversations recently about the future of artificial intelligence. It is everywhere. It will be in your car. It will be in your home. It's pretty much everywhere, and it's getting very pervasive, and it's getting smarter. And, you know, a lot of organizations will be making a lot of decisions programmatically. Pretty much anything that Amazon shows you is the result of some algorithm deciding that you're going to see something or not. You know, right. Your Netflix viewing is determined, the movies you view and the programs you view online are determined by an algorithm. And very soon, the programs you watch on normal TV will be determined by an algorithm. The routes you take in your self-driving vehicle, in your automated vehicle, are going to be determined by algorithm. The products you buy in the store are likely to be determined by algorithms. So they're becoming very pervasive. Now, those algorithms, that there are a lot of other algorithms that determine risk, credit risk, insurance risk. Consumers are currently decisions are being made on our behalf by algorithms. And so, as Kenneth Cukier in his book, BigData, puts it very nicely, is that we are being punished for our propensities. My insurance risk is being scored based on a lot of data, and there's no human intervention in that. And so when a human tries to intervene, those processes are not set up for human intervention. I can and can't get a loan. It's black and white because of an algorithm that's determined my credit score. So I can't affect it. There's risk to this. Deirdre Mulligan at Berkeley talks of algorithmic scapegoating, and she tells a really interesting story about food stamps in the US. So the department that issues the food stamps is obviously very concerned that certain, that there's fraud going on, where those food stamps are being traded for cash and then goods are being bought. And they have some algorithms that detect that type of fraud, and they look at specific stores where large numbers of food stamps are cashed, particularly in one go, looking at similar or the same products that can obviously offered be for resale. And, one little, data science trick is they're looking for round numbers, just with ending in, 0 cents. Now, apparently there was a case somewhere in the South where there was a Muslim community that wasn't particularly affluent, so they had to have food stamps, and they also didn't have many vehicles between them. And so when there was a vehicle available, they would drive whatever distance it was to their halal grocery store where they could get the meat for religious observances. And they would drive there as a group of people, and they would spend together, probably buying the same things. And the interesting thing is they would, when they bought meat, they didn't buy it by the pound. They said, can I have $10 worth of meat? So that was a nice round number. Now, what happened was that the algorithm detected these stores looked like potential fraudulent hubs, and they prevented them from accepting food stamps anymore. Now, that's not the only case. There's been another case in New York that I read about recently. So this is prevalent, and algorithms they're carrying bias because the bias hasn't been thought through properly, and there's no real governance on an algorithm. Now, where this story gets more interesting is because it's government departments that buy these algorithms to use in detecting fraud and implementing various types of policy, and the government department that the procurement department in the government that's looking at these algorithms is not really expert in detecting the quality of an algorithm or how it might behave in case of some strange anomalous data. What that department is very expert at doing is making sure that there's no fraud in the procurement process and the government is not favoring one vendor over another. So the whole process from end to end has to be updated to take into account the increased use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And there's this huge rush. If you go online and you look at all the startups, apparently they all have machine learning, and everybody's busy hiring machine learning engineers. And my big question to them is, great, so you have machine learning engineers. Who is training your machines? And are they being trained correctly? And I think that's something that we need to contend with. And going back to the financial services analogy, in financial services, we have auditors and we have the IRS who put companies under a great deal of scrutiny. Should we have the equivalent in data? Because the legal regulations are one thing, but when the result comes out of a black box, we don't know. So how can we build that level of scrutiny? And going back to Kenneth Kuke again, he calls it the algorithmists, who are like algorithm auditors who come around and audit your algorithm. So I think anybody who's working on an AI product that makes critical decisions on our behalf needs to have this as a consideration.
Mm-hmm. And actually, we're talking about algorithms, we're talking about Facebook too, and we're talking about search engines. And so for people who do care, what solutions are out there? I mean, we have Brave, right? Who's a browser. We have DuckDuckGo. Quant is a search engine. These are all private, and they don't act like Google, and they apparently don't act with algorithms. I'm not even. What about collaborative networks? I work with IDCA. We solve a problem by providing a platform for communication and collaboration without the constant surveillance and algorithms that are out there. What do you think about the solutions like IDCA that are out there?
Well, I'll jump back for a second and address the search problem.
Sure.
Because I always say that Google has reduced the web to 2 pages. Who goes beyond the second page to find anything? And so, yet we place a lot of trust in Google, and we give it data. And I don't know, DuckDuckGo's been around for a while, and there have been other private, privacy advocate search engines that have come and gone. And so, I don't know the future of search. I'd like to know that I was getting the best result, and Google really has the resources to get us a result, with whatever data I give up to them. So I can't really comment on search. However, on IDCA, IDCA is very interesting. And I don't know, maybe you want to take a second to explain what IDCA is to the audience.
Yeah. So, without being, I don't want to do a sales pitch here, but IDCA was built on the premise that privacy is a human right, and that people on Facebook are being told what to see, they're being told what to read, they're being told what to believe, how to vote. IDCA founders didn't want to have that happen on their platform. So basically, it's a social, collaborative platform that allows people to connect, communicate, share, and store anything they want, all in one safe, private platform. It's a walled garden. It's like the old walled garden, but it's got some new coolness to it. But yeah, that's basically IDCA.
So IDCA's not Facebook. Facebook is a very different role in society.
It's not a Facebook experience at all.
Yeah, and Facebook does certain things, and but what I find interesting about IDCA is it's the baseline. Really, that degree of respect of our privacy should be what everybody does, and we should be getting the choice. Let's just take IDCA's philosophy and apply it to Facebook. At that point, I would get the choice whether Facebook chooses to share stuff or throw stuff at me. And so IDCA, it feels like all pieces of software like this should operate like IDCA. And so so I think, we started off with closed systems, which, every system was really a walled garden. And then, the walls started to come down, and people were really allowed to write on websites. And I remember the story when back in, the early days of Amazon, and back when websites were written by an author and nobody could do anything, nobody could touch the website because it was sacred. And then Amazon started to allow people to write ratings and reviews. And that became interesting, as we could write on the web. And, then came MySpaces, and then came Facebook. And that was great. And then came IPOs and duty to make money with the shareholders. And then Facebook started to kind of cross lines. And, Facebook's a baby. It made some mistakes. It screwed up the beacon. And it came back and corrected itself. And so, and then came Cambridge Analytica, and then it started to get evil. So, coming back to IDCA is, what IDCA does is it provides explicit control over what gets put out there and what gets shared. And I think that's going to be very important in the future. And that's something that I'm advocating for, that things are explicit. Putting my corporate hat on, I think IDCA is sitting on a lot of people with a lot of data, and that data has a lot of value if it starts to move. So I would love to see, looking at commercialization models for the data, but doing so as a broker, as an explicit broker, saying, hey, I've got this community of people that are suffering with this disease, and would you like to share that data, particularly with medical research companies who will do this type of activity with it, and they won't do anything else. So becoming that, knowing the position you have and building trust with the people that use it, I think there is tremendous potential. So, I could pay for IDCA with cash, or I could pay with my data. But what the difference is I would know what's being done with it. So I think there's IDCA is very much, could be very much part of that data economy if IDCA wants to be. And if the consumers can opt in or opt out of that. And I think that's what makes IDCA very interesting, and to me, part of, tomorrow's social fabric.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. And I'm sure the founders I wish we had them here so you guys could go back and forth, but that would be another show. So we have a lot left to talk about, and I wanted to make sure, well, let's talk a minute about intervention. You say it's the responsibility of those who took our privacy away in the first place. Can you explain a little bit about how we're going to deal with this?
Yeah. So, I think GDPR is another baseline. It's where governments looked at this and said, look, data's flying around all over the place. We need to stop it. We need to give consumers some aspect of control as to how to stop it. Now, I've yet to meet anybody that says no to all the GDPR cookie consenting. In fact, there was an article that I was trying to read on the Financial Times a couple of days ago, and I clicked on the let me look at the privacy settings, and I got this page of data, a page of buttons that I could turn off. And then I got another page of buttons which said, well, we can't turn it off from here. You have to go to these other sites. And it gave me all of the sites and all of the affiliate sites. If you're interested at all, download the Built With browser plugin. And anytime you go to a website, it can tell you all of the components on that site. And you see who's collecting data all over the place. Or, there's tools that you can put in. You can use the Tor browser to hide. But yet, implementing GDPR is really tough. And this whole notion of fining companies for data breaches, or when consumers complain, or allowing consumers to request their data. Most organizations have not built for that. If enough consumers went to an organization, apart from being given the runaround, it's still a horrible process, because we as companies, they don't know where that data is half the time. There's no audit. That data is not joined up even inside a company. This whole notion of single view of customer is still a holy grail for a lot of organizations. And so to comply with a data request is crippling, or annoying at best. And so GDPR is great in principle. And what it has started doing, and as my friend Brad Rubenstein says, when I tell him that this is all a mess, he always says that this is how we change behavior. And so what GDPR has done is it started to change behavior, making people aware of this. But I don't believe this is where it's going to have its teeth. I believe that there is a growing movement of people that are concerned, and there are some organizations that are trying to do stuff. So out of MIT, there was a project called Solid. Solid was part of Tim Berners-Lee's group, and they're trying to commercialize it now with a company called Inrupt. And they've created this hub where you can download, it's called a pod, and you can put your data in there. Now, I am such a fan of Tim Berners-Lee. His autobiography, The Last Chapter of Weaving the Web, set me off on this quest back in the day, because his vision for the web is so strong and powerful, and I can understand why he's got upset. But I really don't know how many people can be bothered to download a pod and put their data in it. Now, obviously, there's going to be more kind of applications built on top. And, Microsoft has a project called Project Barley. So they're creating these hubs where people could potentially download their data. I don't believe it's going to come from there. My belief is it's going to come from organizations who see the value in our data and want to commercialize it in some way. Obviously, I would, because that's what we do. But so let me just give you an example. This year, there was a notice that John Hancock, the insurance company, is sending out Fitbits to its customers, and its customers will run around and jump around, and the activity data will go back to Hancock, and Hancock will give you a discount on your insurance. Now that could be hundreds of dollars, and it's great. And other people have contended with that, saying, well, what if I don't exercise? Well, I get penalized. Well, if you don't exercise, don't wear the Fitbit, don't give your data up, you go on the same insurance model as everybody else. So this is data on the move. And this is how an organization has created a data transaction with an offer explicitly attached to it. And that, I believe that is not a one-off exercise. Rally Healthcare are, I think, there's an app called Rally, and again, they take your activity data, and I think they send it to your employer, and the employer puts credits into your health insurance program. So there are that many, data transactions going on. So I believe that it's corporate organizations are going to solve this problem because they see commercial benefit in it. And if they act correctly and responsibly with the consumers whose data that they're going to broker, I think something great can happen. 23andMe, it was born out of the vision that if it can map the genome, and I will give it some samples of DNA, and it will map my genome and take all that data, consolidate it, and do some good with that information. Now, the flip side of it is they could sell it to insurance companies. And without the transparency that I'm advocating for, when I did my 23andMe test, I don't know where that data is gone. And I read this stuff, and I'm sure it's gone off to various forms, and I don't know where it's going to end up in the future. And once the data's out and combined, it's gone. We don't see it anymore. I guess it's like the Brundlefly. Once, there's no going back. Yet, if an organization like 23andMe gave me control over how that data was used, I would willingly share my data to research specific diseases, even diseases I don't have. And then, as long as I knew it wasn't going anywhere else, and there was enough encryption and security that I could trust on that. So I really do believe that organizations that hold my data can viably share it if they provide those models. And I think that, coupled to privacy regulations that come from government, those two things together are going to get data moving again. So I'm not so much a privacy geek now. I'm a let's get data moving again geek.
Right. So my next question, but I think you've pretty much already answered it, is can the masses dictate what privacy means?
Not yet, but I believe that as the optimist that I am, I believe it's coming. I feel that there are enough technologies out there that are emerging that are allowing data to start to mobilize, and then the permission structure will come in. So there's companies like Data Republic that allow corporations to share data in a cloud, and it's safe and secure. A lot of the blockchain technology, particularly Elastos, they have the models for this, for the smart contracts on data. There's a couple of companies, J-Link, which is providing the infrastructure for data mobility between organizations, and a company that's recently come out, Duality, which is creating a form of encryption, which allows data encrypted to be processed without decrypting it, and the person seeing the result. So, for example, I could send my my phone history record, my call detail records from my phones and my bank transactions to somewhere, they could compute a credit score, and they would never need to see all the calls that I made, or all of the detail. Particularly with location data, communications data, that I know that the data that we create is expanding exponentially. The number of network nodes and edges where my data is traveling is increasing. So we're going to have to do something about it. I think just like the natural order of things. And I'm seeing there's enough movement in the tech space, in the privacy tech, I think it's called privacy tech now, that space to make, data start to move again. So I think it's going to be the masses subscribing to these services and agreeing. Mm-hmm. And really that's how they're going to dictate it. And when these organizations start to launch these data services, whether consumers have the confidence to subscribe or not is what it's going to be telling. I mean, and there's a generation coming in that is very, very comfortable sharing a lot of data. And so I think there's going to be a slightly different paradigm as well. And, is there going to be this big data apocalypse that the privacy geeks have foretold for a long time? I don't think so. I think it's just going to move, and I think consumers are going to get more and more comfortable with the notion, and more security things are going to be put in place, and we're going to get to a place where data is shared. We are going to have some control. I think it's inevitable.
Mm-hmm. And so that brings me to, do you want to talk to people a little bit more about what your project is that you're working on?
Yeah, it's less of a project.
Is it top secret?
No, of course it's absolutely not top secret. It's less of a project and more of a series of conversations where I am talking to large organizations who have a good amount of our own data. Banks and insurance companies are kind of key in this, but also they've got particularly sensitive data that we already trust them. Despite the surveys that we don't trust our banks and we don't like insurance companies, we do have some degree of trust because they have that data. And so my conversation is with those organizations saying, what if you were to become custodian of my data? Or not so much my data, but the permissions on my data. So I know my data is held by 100 or so organizations. Will you maintain a permissions system for me to allow me to have some control over that data? Give me transparency, allow me to do a GDPR data request, and enable data to be shared between two organizations on my behalf. Can I get a better mortgage rate because I've shared with the mortgage company my bank history and my mobile phone history and my exercise history? Maybe there's a data science, there's an indicator in the data that if I exercise regularly, I'm more likely to pay my mortgage off. So I'm trying to go through this thought process with these organizations as to what a control mechanism might look like. And there are a number of very significant and large organizations who are already mobilizing in this space now. That's probably pretty much all I can say.
Well, it's good timing because looking at the clock, it looks like we're out of time today. But listen, I think we're going to have Gam come back and we're going to talk a little bit more about the solutions to the big problems. And thanks everyone for joining us. If you want to find Gam, you can see his information there in his lower third on the screen. And if you want to find IDCA and start a free account, www.idka.com. So thanks everyone for joining us today. And Gam, thanks so much.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Cheers.
We'll talk again soon.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.